Hi, I'm Corey Reed, and on behalf of all of us at John Deere, happy Thanksgiving to you and your family. In this season of giving thanks, I'm especially grateful for the farmers and ranchers who work the land each and every day to produce the food we eat, the fuel we use, and the clothes we wear. During this time, we also find ourselves reflecting on both the challenges and triumphs of the past year. But we also keep an eye on the future and the possibilities ahead. At John Deere, that means delivering new and innovative, high-quality equipment solutions, including those developed right here at John Deere Harvester Works in Illinois, that help farmers and ranchers do more with less. For most of us, fall harvest is wrapping up or has already, which means that time of year when we get together with family and friends to give thanks. From the John Deere team, we sincerely hope you enjoy this time and the traditions of the season. Happy Thanksgiving, and thank you for everything you do for American agriculture.
Hello and happy Thanksgiving. I'm Tyne Morgan.
And I'm Clinton Griffiths. We're both happy to be joining you again this year to celebrate the end of another harvest season.
That's right, Clinton. But we know this year wasn't without its challenges, whether it was financial or the never-ending battle with Mother Nature. That is especially the case in states hit hard by Hurricane Helene.
That's right, Tyne. The powerful storm hitting Florida toward the end of September, bringing damage to several states with nearly 100,000 farms in the hurricane's path. Farmers losing crops, livestock, and equipment.
One of the hardest hit states is North Carolina, where damage to infrastructure left some areas in the western part of the state inaccessible, as Linda Loveland of the North Carolina Farm Bureau shows us.
I'm not sure I'll ever see Yancey County rebuilt back to where it was in my lifetime.
Helene is long gone, yet the reality of its impact remains.
People have lost homes, people have lost lives. We're going to be dealing with scars from this flood for centuries from now. Debris like you can't even imagine. This field used to be pretty much at road level. Now it's probably 2 to 3 foot higher. This barn was actually sitting about 200 yards up from where we stand right now. The floodwaters at this point were probably somewhere in the order of 500 yards wide. 30 yards across is what this river typically runs.
He showed us the after effects at his own farm.
We've got a boatload of fence to rebuild. We did lose some corn. The pasture behind the house has developed a bit of a mudslide that's not broken loose yet, but has got me worried now. And then our timber, I would say my wife and I probably lost 2/3 of our timber. The wind just, when you go up on the mountain, it looks like pickup sticks.
He talked about the loss of other agricultural land in a county that needs to preserve as much as possible.
Some of the most fertile land in Yancey County was along the Cane River Valley. A lot of, flat river bottoms, sandy, fertile, great places to grow corn, hay, things of that nature. But this storm was ruthless. I mean, just behind us in a 400, 500 yard stretch, there's been 6, 8, 10 acres of land that's lost that would take tens of thousands of loads of dirt to ever reclaim. I'm not sure that will ever be reclaimed. And that is definitely a detriment to the county because these river bottoms were super valuable. I mean, it was some of the best farmland in the counties.
So much lost and so many questions about how to move forward.
And I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges moving forward is how do we rebuild? How do we get back to a point of normalcy? How do we get back to where we was? And I think that's going to be one of our greatest challenges.
And our thanks to Linda Loveland and the North Carolina Farm Bureau.
In Clinton, farmers across the U.S. have stepped up to help those impacted by Hurricane Helene. Recently, our own Machinery Pete highlighted an auction by Justice Farm and Construction Equipment in Lewisburg, North Carolina, where auctioneer Jason Acock sold his personal farm tractor, donating 100% of the profits directly to farmers affected by the hurricane. The sale raised a total of $60,000. The tractor sold for $23,000. The rest was an additional bidder donations.
That's the generosity of farm country showing through right there, Tyne.
That is for sure. And coming up, more of that giving spirit, including why these farmers were lining up just to give their grain away.
And a farmer who has decided this harvest will be his last.
Harvest of Thanks is brought to you by John Deere. Your land, your brand. Technology, equipment, and support to help you farm better now and generations from now.
Well, for many, farming is more than a job. It's a lifestyle that is often passed on from generation to generation. But for one Nebraska farmer, he's decided to take early retirement. And as Michelle Rook tells us, he's doing it with a full heart and a clear conscience.
2024 was the final harvest season for fourth-generation farmer Jay Reiners. With none of his kids wanting to come home to take over the farm, he made the tough decision to retire. However, his farm will still leave a legacy, even if it isn't his immediate family. Jay Reiners is the fourth generation on this farm in south central Nebraska, homesteaded by his great-grandfather in 1892.
I've been farming full-time since 1990 myself.
Over the last 34 years, he's grown the operation to 2,700 acres through continuous improvement and cutting-edge technology. And Reiners, just like his father, intended to pass the farm down to the next generation.
Our oldest, we tried farming together when he was in college, and it's like finally he and I are too much alike. We butted heads, and it's like, you need to go work for a real boss instead of dad for a boss.
Reiners' youngest son grew up in the tractor seat, but surprisingly declared one day he did not want to return to the farm either.
I just see you guys, all the stress, all the struggles, you know, going to the banker, all this stuff, and, you know, the storms coming up, you know, the worries and all that stuff. And he goes, I just don't want to live that life, which I totally get and don't blame him.
In fact, for Reiners, it came as a huge relief and helped him decide 2024 would be his last season farming.
And that's probably what's driven my decision to retire at age 54. Really is like, I don't have anyone coming back, so why fight it, I guess.
He was also stressed out by the weather and volatile markets.
That's probably the biggest stress, you know, not worrying about whether we have a corn crop standing the next morning when you wake up. Second biggest stress is probably marketing.
This fall, all Reiners' kids came back to share in the harvest and ride in the combine with him for the last time.
Yeah, it was a great, you know, great family ending, I should say.
When he finally got to the last round, he was nearly numb.
I thought I'd shed a tear, but my auger wagon driver said, I noticed the combine got faster and faster. It's just like, please God, just let it get to the end before something breaks down.
Reiners isn't selling his farm, but instead renting the land of friends and will help kickstart another generation.
The guy that's farming my ground, his son's coming back, so yeah, I'm passing down a legacy to somebody else's kid, which is fine. Give them the opportunity.
And he has no regrets because the legacy of the farm lives on in the success of his 5 children. As for Jay, while serving on the Nebraska Corn Board, he discovered another calling.
I want to continue on in an international trade policy and stuff like that. That's where my heart really is.
And that will allow him to continue to promote the industry he loves in the next chapter of his career. I'm Michelle Rook with this Harvest of Thanks.
Thanks, Michelle. Well, up next, a well-known basketball team is thankful just to exist, not just this year, but every year. How a cornfield and the help of one small town saved a legacy in the making. That's next.
The Los Angeles Lakers is one of the most successful teams in the history of basketball, but it was almost the team that wasn't. Andrew McCrea tells the story of the Minneapolis Lakers, a snowstorm, and the team's unexpected arrival in the town of Carroll, Iowa.
This may look like just another basketball court in a city park, but take a closer look at the purple and gold paint and the plaque here in front, and you'll find that there's a much bigger story, a story that dates to 1960. It was the night of January 17th, 1960. The Minneapolis Lakers NBA basketball team had lost to the St. Louis Hawks on Sunday evening in St. Louis. The team boarded their DC-3 at 8:30 that night for their flight back to Minneapolis. As John Steffes explains, the plane lost electrical power soon after takeoff. They had no instruments, no radar, and virtually no vision as they flew into a snowstorm somewhere over Iowa. The pilots decided to try and descend low enough to see the ground and perhaps find a landing spot. They didn't know it at the time, but they were over the town of Carroll, Iowa.
One guy who lived by the water tower, he took his kids to the basement. It just shook the house. It's a loud plane, so when you buzz the town at least 9 times, you're waking people up.
Carroll resident Dr. Jack Donovan was in bed, now in the early hours of January 18th.
The plane woke me. It was going this way and coming back this way. Finally, it really got loud, and I got up. But my neighbor across the street was standing there waving his arms at me. He said, "Duck."
The pilots knew the roar of their engines were waking people. They could see porch lights coming on. But where were they? And was there someplace to land here?
Came around that water tower, and as he turned left, he saw the L's in the water tower. As he turned around the water tower, he could look out and see this dark spot out here.
It was a cornfield. A wet fall had prevented the area from being harvested, and the pilots decided it would become their runway. Norman Hutchison remembers coming to this spot to see what had taken place.
It was just a cornfield, and here's this airplane that made a track down through the corn and setting up against the fence down there, and just looked like he landed in an airport, except it wasn't an airport.
Townspeople rushed to the scene to see the fate of the plane and passengers. Townspeople opened the hotel and the switchboard, providing a way to call home and a bed for the night. The team took a bus back to Minneapolis the next day. The plane was repaired, and a bulldozer cleared a path in the cornfield for it to take off 3 days later. The team continued to use the plane. But if the pilots had not pulled off the landing and all would have perished, NBA basketball would probably be different today.
There were only 8 teams in the NBA back then, and so the Lakers were this close to being wiped out that night.
And the Minneapolis Lakers, who were to move to Los Angeles the next year, would have ceased to exist, eliminating an iconic team in today's NBA. On the 50th anniversary of the life-saving landing here, the town and the LA Lakers joined together to build an outdoor basketball court at the site where it all happened. The court is marked with the LA Lakers colors of purple and gold and has a light blue border, a nod to the colors of the old Minneapolis Lakers. You can come here today to play basketball yourself at the site where a town welcomed an NBA team when they made their emergency landing in a snowy cornfield. For Harvest of Thanks, traveling the countryside in Carroll, Iowa, I'm Andrew McCrea.
With tight margins these days and prices penciling out in the red for farmers, just giving away grain is a big deal. But farmers were lining up to do it in one community. Hear why next.
Well, we've all heard it before. Farming is bad for the environment. All large farms are corporate farms. Agriculture is killing the planet. Those misconceptions about ag seem to be endless. But a group of farmers is trying to change that by harvesting for their future.
This is 50 years for me, so I'm the 3rd generation.
For 50 years, this has been Mike McLaughlin's view every fall. The landscape of ag has changed across the last 5 decades, but harvest is the constant every year.
Yields are good. Could be one of the best crops I've ever had, I think.
And in a year of low commodity prices, when every bushel counts, this just may be one of his most selfless harvests yet.
You hope you've done enough over the years that when you get towards retirement that you can do some things like this.
McLaughlin, along with his wife and farm, decided this harvest to give back, bringing in grain that could be donated to the Children's Discovery Museum in Normal, Illinois.
Here's the cows, and you can actually milk them.
An exhibit that's nearly 20 years old still houses a treasure trove for agriculture, allowing kids to immerse themselves with life on the farm. But now there's a new growth this museum is nurturing to modernize the museum and better reflect modern ag.
The very first gift of our campaign was actually a farm family that stepped up and said, let us be a part of this.
This fall, as the grain rushed in from the field, farmers like McLaughlin could donate money or a truckload of grain And it's all to take the museum from this to this.
We really are leaning into the agriculture exhibit really being the heart of the museum. So everything starts in the ag exhibit and kind of moves out from health and nutrition, even into transportation.
A $4 million renovation project that's a monumental undertaking, but one that this retired teacher, farmer's wife, and proud grandma knew the farmers of McLean County were up for.
I also said if a farmer wants to tell the story, they need to be able to do it. Instead of having somebody like me, a city person, come in and say this is what it's all about, they need to have the opportunity to tell their story, and this is it.
So she got to work, contacting grain elevators, posting signs, and spreading the word far and wide.
With the exhibit being as old as it is, there's just a lot of farming trends that are outdated. And so we want to make sure that we're showcasing kind of the farm of the future for our kiddos.
A $4 million feat, and it's agriculture that's rising to the occasion.
It's been work, but it's been fun. The farm families have always been welcoming and loved to hear the story and wanted to be part of it. And that's really the amazing part, is the community, the ag community embraces this.
Well, coming up, a celebration of steel that helped push farmers farther west, the beauty and important role windmills played and continue to play on the farm. That's next.
Harvest of Thanks is brought to you by John Deere. Your land, your brand. Technology, equipment, and support to help you farm better now and generations from now.
More than 100 years ago, they represented life itself on the farm, dotting the landscape of the plains, carrying water from deep underground to the surface.
This morning, we take a look at the humble windmill and give thanks for its important role in history as we visit an Indiana museum dedicated to keeping them alive. Serenity in rhythm as the sounds of progress echoes across this Indiana acreage. Each windmill a story from generations past.
The design hasn't changed much. You've got your fan blade, you've got your gearbox that transforms the wind into mechanical power or force to pump the water, and there really hasn't been a change.
The Mid-American Windmill Museum and its spinning displays stand tall in Kendallville, once a hotbed for mill manufacturers.
At the turn of the century, in this tri-state area, there was over 100 different windmill manufacturers.
This was the hub of the windmill companies because of the wood that was available, the poplar, the oak, hickory.
First patented in 1854 by Daniel Halliday, he created a windmill that could automatically turn to face changing wind directions and mechanically self-regulate its own speed.
There's a lot of people that understand the mechanics of things if you work on the farm, and he probably had to be involved with agriculture of some sort in those days.
As the West expanded and surface water in America's vast arid regions became harder to find, the windmill stood in the gap, a stoic symbol of civilization silhouetted against a painted sky.
And when you're out in a 160,000 acre ranch, they're very useful out there, and the only way to get water to the cattle.
Windmills also helped drive settlers to new regions as water stations dotted the railroad every 20 to 50 miles in service of thirsty steam-powered locomotives. It's a piece of history this museum is pouring back into the community.
Most kids don't grow up on farms anymore. It's real enlightening to see these kids understand how this all works and where the water actually comes from.
They give a lot of tours to kids, but it's not uncommon to find a nostalgic adult sitting among the mills transported to days gone by.
A lot of people enjoy the noises, because you don't hear the noises like that in the cities anymore, right? You hear honking horns in big cities and sirens and so on, and you can come out here and enjoy the serenity of what it might have been like in the late 1800s to early 1900s.
Back to another time, before the hustle and bustle of modern America.
And they say the windmills are talking to them when they're making the noise, or they're singing to them.
A song from the past, standing tall against time's horizon as a reminder that simple ingenuity can conquer even the harshest foe.
Well, don't go anywhere. From remarkable rescues to a toast to the history of the strong ag foundation we have today, we have much more Harvest of Thanks when we come back.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by Pioneer.
Ben's bins, please hold.
Yeah, Ben's has been busy all day.
Seems like no one can keep up with this new Z series. What did you all put in these seeds?
Science.
Well, the first Thanksgiving meal probably didn't have a lot of the traditional things we eat today, mashed potatoes, stuffing, and the like, you know, all the good stuff. More than likely, scholars say it would have been made of seafood, fresh vegetables, cornmeal, and deer for meat, but certainly not goats. And one of the rarest breeds of goats in the world, brought by English settlers, is finding a home here in the Midwest. We visited Conner Prairie, Indiana for a look at a couple of kids and an effort to preserve history.
You first got a glimpse of these exceptional kids last year. They aren't just any goat. You're looking at Arapaw goats, one of the rarest breeds of goats in the world.
It's a phenomenal feeling, you know, to be able to work to maintain a breed that's effectively endangered.
But thanks to this team, the breed that was originally brought here by English settlers is finding a new home once again in the Midwest.
I've seen in the last 10 years, you know, we have gone from 5 goats here up to 35 goats. I've watched the breed go from just a couple active breeders to, you know, we're at 25, 30 active breeders right now, and thinking about it in the future is just really exciting to know that the work that we're doing today is really going to influence where the breed goes in the future and hopefully for their success.
Knowing the Arapaw breed was on the verge of extinction, Conner Prairie, which is a hands-on historical museum based in Indiana, teamed up with RSG, which stands for Reproduction Specialty Group, and they did so with one goal: to save the breed.
Last season was a phenomenal success, and so we were able to use the frozen semen genetics from the Smithsonian and partnered up with Conner Prairie. So I think we achieved a little over an 80%, pretty close to an 82% conception rate on those goats. So phenomenal success. They were thrilled. The babies were born. Everything went quite well there.
With Arapaw being a heritage breed, they didn't have a lot of data to pull from. But thanks to technology from RSG, the mission to reproduce this breed was a grand success.
Because of the success we had last year, Conner Prairie decided to move one step farther into what's called embryo transfer. And so it's multiple ovulation embryo transfer. And everything kind of went as planned, and the technology was able to marry up with the need for maintaining the heritage breed, and we had great success.
We worked with RSG to inseminate another round of does using Smithsonian semen, and we were able to do an embryo transfer with some of the semen that we got from a buck that we used last year.
The team was able to successfully collect 7 embryos, 5 of which were put into does, and the other 2 were frozen and sent to the Smithsonian.
They've been really lovely people to work with, and have been really excited to have new genetics brought into their germplasm bank.
It's that offspring that was then sent across the U.S.
From the 7 does that we did AI on, 6 of them did settle, and we ended up having 10 kids. From those kids, we have sent bucks off to North Carolina, Missouri, Kansas, and Washington states. So we've helped spread genetics through breeders that we knew.
A dual-purpose breed that's valuable for its meat and its milk.
Take today's modern technology and partner with them and marry that back to maintaining and developing this heritage breed is just phenomenal. As a kid growing up on the farm, you look down the path of life, and whether that's school or careers or jobs and things like that, you know, you have big dreams and aspirations, and these are some of the dreams that you don't know you dream about until you experience it. And so it's kind of a dream come true to be able to help and maintain those type of initiatives that are greater than we are.
It's the work here that's preserving the past while also growing a new future.
When we come back, he's known as the father of the Green Revolution, an Iowa farm boy who is credited with saving over 1 billion people worldwide from starvation. We'll pay tribute to Norman Borlaug this Thanksgiving. That's next. Well, Norman Borlaug was one of the key figures in the Green Revolution who helped farmers grow more and better crops really around the world. His work led him to receive the Nobel Peace Prize for the lives he saved through food and nutrition. He was able to put that food on the table of those who may have had to go without any food at all. Andrew McCrea takes us to the farm where his story begins.
South of Cresco, Iowa, you will find a small farmstead with quite a story.
By the time that they came to live in this house, which was 1922, Norm was about 8 years old or so, and they had just bought the farm a year or two before that. It was 56 acres.
And it later grew to just over 100 acres in size. Tom Spindler is speaking of young Norman Borlaug from the family's farm south of Cresco, Iowa. Next to the home, you will today find the school Norm attended as a boy. Both Norman's father and grandfather had attended the very same school. They ended their formal education without going to high school. The story would be different for Norman.
They saw in him that he had a spark. And I remember Charlotte, his younger sister, said that the family always felt, even when he was a teenage boy, that this guy had something in him that was something special.
The family drove Norman 14 miles into Cresco, where he would board for the week, then come home on the weekends to help on the family's farm. Norman's agriculture teacher and his wrestling coach encouraged him to go to college. His grandfather, Nels, helped make that happen.
As Norm decided to go to the University of Minnesota, as he gave him 11 silver dollars, and he said to Norm, he says, "Norm boy, you take this, you can pay your tuition with it for the first quarter." And he says, "Feed your head now so you can feed your belly later."
Norman would go on to feed much more than his own belly. Borlaug helped develop wheat varieties in Mexico and later in Pakistan, India, and other locations that helped feed and save the lives of millions of people. His work led many to call him the father of the Green Revolution. Today, the farm where Borlaug was raised continues his mission.
We do lots of educational programming here. We have 2 Inspire Days. We call them Inspire Days because Norman Borlaug was a very inspiring person. And so we have, we've targeted 5th grade mainly, and so we have area 5th graders from probably a dozen different schools.
Borlaug's work was recognized by many around the world. Notably, he won the 1970 Nobel Peace Prize and later the Presidential Medal of Freedom, among many awards in his lifetime. But as Spindler shares, Borlaug was always a teacher at heart, a mission they carry on today, and a story that shows the impact one farm boy can have on the world.
And look at what he did in his lifetime from being just a farm kid that is feeding his horses and the cows and the chickens and farming that land with horses out there. And look what he did in his lifetime. He turns around and is credited with saving hundreds of millions of lives.
Norman Borlaug's early years here on the farm truly influenced his life forever. They were lessons that he carried with him to impact the lives of literally millions of people around the globe. And it's an educational focus that continues on his farm yet today. With Harvest of Thanks near Cresco, Iowa, I'm Andrew McCrea.
Thanks, Andrew. Well, from saving other lives to the battle of saving your own, Clinton Griffiths has a remarkable grain bin rescue. That's next. Well, each year more people die from farming than while serving as police officers, firefighters, or other emergency responders. And grain bin entrapments, well, those are the leading cause of agricultural confined space-related injuries and fatalities. Clinton Griffiths has a remarkable story this weekend about a Kentucky farmer who has a newfound respect for the grain bin after a close call, but is now sharing his story of survival.
These are the precious moments Doug Omer nearly missed.
We thought we were being safe and we let our guard down for a second and it almost cost me my life.
May 4th, 2022, Doug and his father Mike started the day hauling a couple of loads of corn. The first load went perfectly, and Doug spent a few minutes at the top of the bin waiting for the truck to get back.
The bin was a little over half full. We were kind of on red alert. We had a little bit of a scum coming on top of the bin.
Typically, just an 8-minute job. Doug eased into the bin to watch for clumps that might clog up the works. A rope was there, but he didn't tie off.
I guess we'd run probably 20 seconds and I hear this shh. What is that? And I turned around and here it come. Well, I was somewhere top of my boots in the corn And when it hit me, it took me about to my bottom of my pockets and moved me about 20 foot right over the hole. I was right there. I was one sheet over that, right there.
Oh, wow.
We weren't too far apart. He was hearing me.
I heard a big bang and I thought a bucket come off the leg.
And I'm not real smart, but I knew I didn't have enough Doug hanging out for 8 minutes. So I'm beating on the bend. Well, it's getting up in here and starting to kind of mash life out of me. And me and Jesus had pretty damn good talk. And I thought, this is how you're gonna die in this freaking bin. Damn bin full of corn, this is how you're gonna leave here. So I got my arms and got me a big breath, and I just, with every ounce of my being, I started beating on the walls.
Then I heard another bang, and I knew a bucket hadn't come off the leg because I'd already shut the leg down.
I got down to about right in here, and I had already laid my head back to give me a few extra seconds, and I hear it most every night, that breaker kick on top. It's kind of a shoom.
Everything stopped. Doug was trapped, buried, and fighting for breath as the pressure squeezed the life out of him.
It's 66 steps. He's 72 or 3 years old. It seemed like a split second he was up there. Our cell phones are terrible right here. He said, you're in bad shape. I said, I'm in bad shape. He goes, I'm coming in. I said, you can't come in. I said, the phones don't work anyway. You come in here, I'm a dead man. I said, you're gonna bury me when you come in here. You gotta stay outside.
Instead, Mike called 911.
911, where's your emergency?
We got him uncovered, he's up there, but we just can't get him out.
We tied a rope onto him, and we gave him two real good tugs, and we couldn't even shake him.
I wanted to call my wife. She owns a flower shop right beside the fire department.
I answered it, and it was Doug, and he said, I just called to let you know that I'm drowning in the grain bin. And I'm like, what? And he told me again. And he said, I just want to call and tell you I love you.
Trapped in the grain bin, Doug has no idea how much help was on the way. The incredible rescue when we return. Trapped in his grain bin and buried up to his neck in corn, Kentucky farmer Doug Omer called his wife to tell her he loved her. Clinton Griffiths picks up the incredible story.
I said, I'm hung in a bin. I said, if things go bad, tell grandkids and kids that I love them and I love you.
That started a 6-hour race to save Doug's life as more than 200 emergency personnel, neighbors, family and friends worked to pry him from death's door. Crews brought bin rescue tubes that they had trained on just the week prior.
Them tubes are only 28 inches wide, so I'm pretty snug. And they went to digging.
A battery-powered cordless drill drove a 3-inch auger, pulling grain slowly out of the tube. 2 hours went by.
Well, when they had moved me, I'm sitting about like this. Come to find out, I wouldn't fit in the tube. They hit my right kneecap.
They added a second set of tubes and went back to work. Doug needed IVs and oxygen. By hour 5, he was ready to do anything to shake free.
I wanted to cut my legs off. I told him, I said, you bring him in here. I know he took blood. I know the helicopter's here. I'll end this. So I'll just stick it down there and cut till something pops off. Y'all work on one, and when we get that deal, I'll cut the other one, we'll leave him. I was hurting that bad.
You're in fear because he's in there so long. You was in fear that he may lose his legs. You know, he may come out alive, but he may lose his legs.
They were going to cut the bin if I fit in the tube and let it suck me out and try to dig me out. I'd had 25 minutes of oxygen. They've had enough manpower here, they was going to just let me hit the ground. I wasn't for that. But when I didn't fit in the tube, they said it would dismember me and I'd bleed to death before I suffocated. So that took that out.
Back in the bin, with enough corn moved away, a team of 3 grabbed Doug's harness and pulled.
And I went screaming, you move me, you move me, you move me, and instantly they hit me again. They moved me about 6 inches. Well, they felt that. Again, they hit me a third time. Well, the third time, I'm standing up inside the tube.
His hips, knees, and ankles were dislocated and had to be pushed back into socket. Then he worked his way to the top of the bin.
Everybody started cheering. And it took him a while to get down the steps, but he walked down each step.
Tell me about that moment.
Glad he's alive.
His family met him at the bottom as he was ferried to a life flight helicopter standing by in a field near the bend. While in the air, his body went into shock from the hours of pressure. It was like he'd been deep sea diving for 6 hours.
I run my hand up in there, this headset, and it was full of blood. And I looked at Lainey, she's sitting right here, and I said, this can't be good.
The helicopter dropped as low as possible, and doctors rushed Doug into the hospital. His joints were reset, his vitals monitored, and at 11:30 p.m., he walked out of the hospital and headed for home.
Come here, Pumpkin.
2 years later, the gift of life continues, thanks to hundreds of unnamed hands.
Everything just worked out so perfectly. And you don't think your hometown people can be heroes? But they was our heroes that day.
And if you ask them their advice for other farmers working around grain bins,
don't think it can't happen to you, because he was 54 years old. He's around them all of his life. And it's that one instant that almost got him.
Just stand back and look at it before you bail in there. I mean, most farmers, they're all self-employed. You get wound up and get in a hurry.
Taking time to think about safety, even on small jobs, could be the difference between a quick end and a long and happy life.
Just wow. Thank you, Clinton. Well, continuing with the survival theme, one Iowa farmer was caught in a scary situation a year ago. The hose on his anhydrous tank came unhooked, shooting anhydrous straight toward him. His story and that remarkable rescue is next. Well, this time of year, you'll see fall fertilizer applications across the countryside. Much of that here in the Midwest is anhydrous ammonia. To wrap up our Harvest of Thanks show this weekend, we have an exclusive look into an anhydrous ammonia accident that happened in rural America a year ago and the miracle that followed.
It was calm across these Iowa fields on November 19th. It was a Sunday, and Kendra Vanderleest says here in central Iowa, it seemed prime for fall field work.
Before lunch, he decided it was fit to pull ammonia.
And about 7:30 that night, she heard the tractor crawling toward the house, thinking it meant Joe was calling it quits for the night.
Just happened to look up out the window, and I saw the tractor and a plume of anhydrous smoke. I knew it was Joe. I knew instantly it was Joe.
She rushed to grab her phone, and she said she was full of fear. Knowing she would call and Joe might not even be alive to answer, she called anyway.
I think he's Joe. All I can say was help me.
I hung up and called 911. But I knew by the way he said help me that he was badly hurt.
Kendra says she found Joe crawling on this gravel about 200 yards from where the tractor had stopped, and he was fighting for his life.
As soon as he heard me, he just collapsed. He didn't have any burns on his skin, so the water didn't really do any good. There was nothing for me to dump the water on, but all of his burns were all internal.
I was badly burned inside.
As Kendra was driving to the hospital, she still didn't know what had just transpired in the field. All she knew is Joe was applying anhydrous, something he's done for nearly 30 years.
And when I was turning on the corner, the left front tire of the twin tank must have ran over my hose, and then it broke the front valve, or pulled the threads out, and it come apart. The whole field was turning fog, and I'm like, I got to go to plan B. I do not know what to do.
That's when Joe decided his only option was to head toward the house, all while he couldn't see, and he was losing oxygen to breathe.
I lost where I was at. I just drove by
feel.
Somehow he made it past, and at that point, the smoke cleared enough to see the gravel road.
I'd only pulled 1.1 acres off that tank, so I knew that sucker had a lot of anhydrous in it. And it kept blowing at the tractor. And I was so scared to get out, but I knew I had to, because was my only choice.
He says he threw on a sweatshirt he had with him and grabbed a bottle of water he knew he had on the floor. And after he climbed out, he tried to run toward the house, but ran out of air.
And I went down and I started crawling.
Once Joe was airlifted, Kendra says she still didn't know if Joe was going to survive. Joe spent 10 days in the hospital, but the real work for Kendra started when they sent Joe home. In this Christmas miracle, Joe knows Kendra is his angel.
She saved me. There's no doubt in my mind.
Survival that's also thanks to Kendra, who's cherishing the fact she can celebrate this Christmas with all their family.
Thankful to be alive, she was definitely his angel. Well, thank you for watching and joining us this weekend. From all of us at Farm Journal, happy Thanksgiving. Have a great weekend, and we hope to see you next weekend as we work to build on our tradition.